Hello and welcome to the second in a series of videos on Chapter 8 of Government in America. We've already talked about the basic function of political parties, which is that they are groups of people that organize to try to win elections and get their people into jobs in the government. Um, Now the question is, how do they compete with each other to do this? What are they trying to do? What's the strategy? And what a lot of political scientists have decided to do is apply a psychological idea known as rational choice theory. Rational choice theory says that human beings generally will make reasonable, somewhat logical decisions that are designed to get them whatever it is that they want. And so you look at the situation, you figure out the course of action that will get you what you want, and then you do that thing. So the political scientists have taken this theory and applied it to what political parties do. They look at the situation, they figure out what course of action will get them what they want, and then they do it. So if this is true, the question becomes, what do the political parties want? That's simple. They want votes. They want votes so they can win, so they can get their people into government. So now the next question becomes, how do you get votes? And once again, political scientists are going to apply rational choice theory. And the idea is that if the voters are being rational, they will vote for the party that would give them the things that they want. So if the voters want lower taxes, rational choice theory says they will vote for the party that offers lower taxes. If they want more government services, rational choice theory says voters would vote for the party that's offering more government services. Therefore, rational choice theory says that logically the parties ought to figure out what the voters want and then offer that to them. Figure out what the largest group wants and make that part of their campaign. So that's how the political scientists who operate and apply rational choice theory to politics figure that this works. Voters will logically decide which party will give them what they want and vote for that party, and so therefore parties will logically try and find a way to give the voters what they want. Now, if this is the case, if this is how the system works, then it becomes very important for the parties to be able to figure out what the voters want so that they can offer it to the voters. And this is where we go back to looking at polling and what voters have done in past elections and all of those things to try and figure out what are the voters saying that they want. And when we do surveys in the United States, most voters, the majority of voters, tend to describe themselves as moderate. They say that they're not too liberal and they're not too conservative. They're in the middle. They're moderate. So, rationally, according to logical, thinking and rational choice theory, if the big chunk of voters are in the middle between liberal and conservative, then what you want to do is try and plan and make your pitch to the voters saying that you're most in the middle. You're the one who, you might be a little bit liberal or a little bit conservative, but you're closer to the middle than the other party or the other candidate or the other competitor. And then rationally, those moderate voters would look at you and say, well, okay, maybe you're a little more liberal or a little more conservative than I'd like, but you're still closer to me than the other person. All right. So that's why almost any discussion of uh, of an election, somewhere somebody's going to start asking, how are you going to win the moderates? How are you going to win the independents? How are you going to win the people in the middle who aren't hardcore lined up with your ideology? Because the picture that's in a lot of people's heads is that there's this group of voters in the middle who's looking to decide which way to go. Okay? So then in general elections, candidates and parties try and put themselves as being closer to the mainstream or the middle, or however you want to describe it. Okay? Now, there is a catch to this. There's a complication, because remember, one of the things we said that parties did as a linkage institution was they pick candidates. Okay? So if you want to run, if you're a Democrat and you want to run against the Republicans, or you're a Republican and you want to run against the Democrats, first you have to compete with all the other members of your own party, usually in a primary election, which is an election that's just with your people, usually, or at least that leans and prioritizes your people and your side. So the phrasing here, or the term that's used, is that primary elections and nominating contests are about appealing to the base, the foundation, your most committed voters, who are going to come out and they're going to try and figure out the difference between, these 4 different Democrats or these 5 different Republicans, and they're going to really look at the details and decide who they want to represent them. All right, they're committed, they're really engaged, and they're into this, and they're going to make sure that they have something to say. Now, here's the thing. This base of voters, this foundation, usually they're not the moderates. They're not the ones in the middle. They identify as strongly liberal or strongly conservative, and they're going to vote for the person that they think is closest to them. So now my rationally operating candidate has a problem. They've got to go ideological, all right, to win the nomination. They've got to go to the left, or they've got to go to the right, all right, in order to make sure that they appeal to the voters in their base who are going to pick the nominee. Then, once someone's nominated, then they have to find a way to move themselves back closer to the middle so they can appeal to the moderate or centrist voters who weren't paying attention during the nominating process, and they can appeal to them in the general election and try and win the overall position. So that's why you hear talk in political coverage about moving to the center or tacking to the center or something like that in the general election after the nominating process is over. How are you going to move back into the middle to get these people who say they're not liberal or conservative? All right, so that's the pattern that you see in elections, and it's in part because people are operating under this rational choice theory idea that the voters in the primary want one thing, but the voters in the general election want a different thing, and me as the candidate, I want to please both of them so that I get what I want, which is I get elected. Right? So, it gets complicated because there are things that you say to appeal to the primary voters that might not appeal so much to the general election. But we can look at some case studies of that later on to really, see how that works. Okay. Now, having said all of this, there's not, like I've said, a lot of political scientists apply rational choice theory. A lot of psychologists and other social scientists apply rational choice theory. But not everybody does, and not everybody, fully buys into it. Because in order for all of this rational choice theorizing to work, the candidates, the parties, and the voters all have to be logical. They all have to kind of do a sort of a mental calculation of what's going to give them the best probability of success, and then they have to actually do that. And that's not necessarily the case. Just a few things that might lead us to conclude that maybe rational choice theory doesn't explain everything is that, first of all, is it clear? Do the voters know exactly what the parties want? Do the voters always know what they want? Do they understand the issues well enough, understand their own desires well enough, that they can say, oh yes, here's what I want government to do, and this is the party that's specifically going to give it to me. We said before, a lot of Americans aren't very well informed about the government. So if that's the case, how can they then make their decision based on rational choice theory? That could be a complication. And finally, it's worth considering: do people always act in what we would say is a rational manner? Is it a matter of just adding up the things that you like, and whichever side has the most pluses in their column is what we go with? Or do we go with hunches? Do we go with emotion? Do we go with someone that we just maybe have a gut instinct that we like this person better, even if we don't agree with them? I think that you could make a case for that. And if that's true, then maybe rational choice theory doesn't explain as much as it sets out to. But that being said, it does give us a good way of generalizing and trying to understand what the parties are doing and what they're looking at. But I would be cautious about just sort of applying it without any reservation. That having been said, we're going to, in the next video, talk about the party in its different forms that we raised before: the electorate in the government and in an organizational capacity. And so until then, I leave you with these questions for further thought and discussion.